Close your eyes and let your breath slow like the soft lapping of waves against an ancient ship's hull. Imagine the cold northern sea veiled in a silver mist at dawn. A long, slender ship glides silently over the dark waters, its curved prow cutting through the sea like a silent arrow. There is no roar of battle, no clash of steel. Only the faint creak of oars, the whisper of the wind in the sail, and the quiet determination of those aboard. But beneath the deck, hidden in shadow, lies a cargo far heavier than gold or silver. A human cargo, carried across the seas on a silent tide that would shape the destiny of Europe itself. Have you ever wondered what unseen currents shaped our world? Tonight, you and I will journey together along forgotten trade routes where Viking slave ships moved unseen and a silent commerce changed history forever. Picture it now. The early morning light catching the polished curves of a Viking longship resting by a fjord. The air is crisp with the faint tang of salt and pine carried on the breeze. The ship is beautiful in its simplicity, long, narrow, and built for speed. Crafted from oak planks that overlap like the scales of a great sea serpent, it is both strong and flexible. Its shallow draft lets it glide over ocean swells or slip silently up rivers deep into the heart of foreign lands. You may have heard of these ships as vessels of raiders, swift, deadly, the terror of coastal villages. But tonight we look deeper at how these marvels of engineering serve not only war, but trade. And not just any trade, but a silent, shadowed commerce, where human lives became currency carried beneath the dragon-proud bows. Imagine standing on the shore watching as such a ship is prepared for a voyage. The craftsman's tools, adze, hammer drillers are now silent. The shipwrights have done their work. The ship sits ready, its single square sail folded, its oars stacked neatly along the sides. Nearby, barrels of water, sacks of grain, and coils of rope are loaded. But there is more. Beneath a rough canvas awning, chained together or bound with leather thongs, are captives taken in raids or purchased at far-off markets, destined for other shores, other masters. No chronicler writes of them. No saga sings their names. And yet, without them, much of what we know as medieval Europe might never have come to be. The design of the ship itself tells part of this hidden story. The longship's shallow keel allows it to beach almost anywhere, to land on a flat shore or riverbank where no harbor lies. The oars, manned by silent, practiced hands, mean it can move even when the wind fails, perfect for slipping unseen into inlets and estuaries. The sail, woven tight from wool and treated with animal fat to resist the spray, can catch even a light breeze, making the ship swift over open water. And most important of all, the ship can carry not just warriors, but cargo. Furs, amber, silver, and yes, people. Close your eyes if you like, and picture that ship setting out at dawn. The last sound from shore is the soft splash of oars dipping into the sea. The ship moves like a shadow across the water, leaving only ripples that fade into the morning calm. These ships form the veins and arteries of a hidden economy. Viking slavers sailed east along the rivers of the Rus, south toward the markets of the Byzantine Empire and the Islamic Caliphate, and west across stormy seas to Ireland and Britain. In their holds, silent and unseen, the captives endured the journey just as the ship's timber endured the sea. Can you feel the hush of the wind in the sail? Can you hear the soft murmur of water against wood? Can you sense the weight of the unsung cargo below? In the quiet of the night, the ship becomes a ghost on the water. No herald announces its passing. No record keeps its journey. And yet the wealth of cities, the rise of kings, and the building of great halls depended on these voyages. And so, as our ship slips away from shore and into the mists of forgotten history, we begin to trace the silent paths of Viking slave ships and the trade that reshaped a continent. And as you drift deeper into this story, imagine the ship sailing on toward hidden markets where silver slaves and furs changed hands beneath the gaze of no chronicler. But that is a journey for when you're ready. The sea, dark and endless, carries our ship toward lands where few now remember the quiet commerce that once thrived there. The wind hums softly in the rigging. The oars have long been stowed. Only the steady rhythm of the waves accompanies us as we near a forgotten shore. In the distance, a low mist hugs the waterline, parting just enough to reveal the mouth of a wide river. This is not a grand harbor marked on maps of kings. There are no towers, no banners flying, no city walls. Only a narrow inlet between dense forests of pine and birch. But here in these hidden places, Viking traders once found the markets that mattered most, the silent markets where silver flowed like water, and where lives were quietly bartered, far from the eyes of priests and scribes. The ship eases into a bend of the river, sheltered by overhanging trees. A faint wisp of smoke curls into the morning air, a sign that others are already here. The murmur of voices drifts across the water, low and cautious. This is Bjarmaland, or perhaps the edge of Slavic lands, or a hidden rust port along a river that winds endlessly toward the Black Sea and beyond. The names may change, but the pattern is the same, a meeting place, a crossroads where traders of many tongues gather beneath the hush of ancient trees. Can you hear it? The soft clink of silver coins weighed in a merchant's palm. The rustle of fur bundles unpacked from another ship's hold. The low, urgent words of negotiation spoken in a mix of languages few could write, but many could understand. And beneath it all, the unspoken truth among the amber and wax, among the pelts of fox and ermine human lives, are part of the exchange. The captives are kept hidden at first below deck or behind canvas screens. A glance, a nod, a hand signal, and a buyer steps forward, his eye appraising his purse heavy with silver dirhams from distant Baghdad or gold coins from Constantinople. There are no records kept here, no scrolls or seals to mark the transaction. The trade is silent, yet it reshapes the wealth of kingdoms. Imagine the goods laid out in the dappled shades, silver arm rings, glass beads from the south, bolts of fine cloth, carved combs of bone and antler. And beyond them, a line of captives, silent, resign their fates, sealed by the ebb and flow of this quiet commerce. And so the trade continues day into night, season after season, year after year. The silent markets feed silver into Viking hands, silver that buys sword ships and the loyalty of men. And in return, the captives vanish down the river routes toward the grand cities of the south, where other lives, other empires await them. Do you wonder, as I do, how many lives were shaped silently and visibly by these hidden exchanges? How many towns grew rich? How many fortresses were built? How many kings rose and fell? Because of bargains struck beneath the trees, far from the gaze of history, the ship, its hold now lighter of cargo and heavier with silver, turns once more toward the sea. The silent market fades behind us, its secrets kept safe by the river and the forest. But our voyage has only begun. And as you listen, as you drift with us down these forgotten rivers of trade, I invite you to stay with this story, to join us in exploring the next chapter of this hidden history. If this quiet journey stirs your curiosity, if you find peace in these lost tales of the past, consider gently liking this video, subscribing to the channel, and sharing your thoughts in the comments below. Your support helps keep these stories alive, whispered across the centuries from the shadows of forgotten markets to the shores of today. The ship glides on its sail, catching the steady breeze that flows downriver toward the sea. The deck creaks softly beneath the shifting weight of silver and goods, and beneath the boards in the low, dark hold, the true cost of this voyage breathes quietly. There are no sagas that tell their names, no runestones carved in their memory, and yet without them, without the human cargo carried across these silent waterways, the wealth of Viking chieftains, the rise of their halls, the very expansion of their world might never have come to pass. Picture the hold now dim and close. The scent of pine tar, of damp wood, of the river's chill, mingles with the warmth of bodies kept too close together. There is little light, only thin beams that slip between the planks above. In that half-darkness, faces wait. Some gaze out through the cracks, seeking the sun or the moon, trying to mark the passage of time. Others close their eyes, carried by memory to the places they left behind, or perhaps to places they hope still to see. Where did they come from, these silent passengers? Some were taken in raids along the coast of Ireland or northern Britain, plucked from villages still asleep at dawn, the flames of burning thatch behind them. Others were captured in battle, Slavic men and women seized along the great rivers, exchanged in frontier markets for silver or goods. Some may have been traded twice, three times, passing from hand to hand, like the furs and amber that shared their fate. The longship was the perfect vessel for this hidden trade. Its narrow beam, its low draft, and allowed it to slip unseen where heavier ships could not go. And within its hold, beneath the gaze of stars or storm clouds, the captives endured the long journey south toward the cities of the Caliphate, east along the rivers, to markets where coins bore strange letters and gold gleamed in the sun. Above, the crew went about their work in practiced silence, a hand on the tiller, a watchful eye on the shore. Every man aboard knew the value of what lay below and the risk of being caught with such cargo. They had no need to speak of it. The oars dipped and rose in steady rhythm, as though marking the unbroken line of this commerce that stretched across centuries. Can you hear it? The soft splash of water against wood, the creak of the mat, the distant cry of a seabird, as if echoing the voices that no longer called out. There was profit in this trade, profit enough to buy loyalty, to raise timber halls, to forge fine blades whose patterned, welded steel bore the mark of distant lands. Silver flowed northward in steady streams, filling hoards buried beneath the floorboards of longhouses or hidden in forest clearings. And with that silver came power, the power to command ships, to lead men, to carve a name into the story of the world. But at what cost? Beneath the wealth, beneath the glory, lay the silence of those who had no voice, whose lives became currency in this great exchange. As night falls and our ship sails on, I invite you to linger with this thought. How many of the great stones that still stand in the north, the church foundations, the fortress walls, the ancient piers were paid for with the silver earned through this human trade? How many forgotten names lie buried beneath the weight of history's silence? The river widens now. The ship, heavy with silver furs and memories unspoken, follows the slow pull of the current toward the sea. The night air is cool upon the sailors' faces. Above, the sky is scattered with stars, silent witnesses to the journeys of men and cargo alike. In this quiet moment, as the ship drifts between the dark line of forested banks, it is easy to imagine that this commerce, this silent trade of lives and goods, was a small thing hidden in the shadows of the world. But look closer, and you will see how these quiet exchanges wove themselves into the very fabric of power across Europe. Consider, if you will, the silver. Coins stamped with strange letters, Arabic dirhams from the far south and east, piled in Viking hoards buried beneath the floors of longhouses, or hammered into arm rings worn as both treasure and display. This silver bought swords. It bought loyalty. It funded the building of ships larger, swifter, stronger. And with these ships, new lands were reached. New kingdoms rose. New wars were fought. Every silver coin that passed from the markets of the East into Viking hands told a story that began in the sale of furs or amber or honey, and often, too, in the sale of human beings. These were the hidden tributaries of wealth, unseen, unrecorded, but flowing steadily, reshaping the map of Europe. And what of the captives themselves carried downriver and far from home? Many became the foundation of other powers. In the great cities of the Caliphate, in Byzantium's shining courts, they built the walls, tilled the fields, and served at tables where kings and scholars dined. Their labor, silent and unmarked, enriched cities whose names still echo in our histories. Further north, the silver they bought transformed the Northlands. Chieftains, who once ruled only small territories, now commanded regions, binding smaller clans beneath their banners. Fortresses of stone replaced wooden palisades. Halls of carved timber rose where before had stood only farmsteads. The trade in slaves did not merely fund Viking expeditions, it helped build the very idea of kingship in the north. And so quietly, without proclamation or song, the tide of this hidden trade shaped the destinies of nations. The human cost, invisible in the sagas and the chronicles, lay buried beneath the grandeur it helped create. Imagine the web stretching outward from the forests of Rus, where traders bartered for captives and furs, to the steppe markets where Arab merchants weighed silver and gold, to the ports of England and Ireland, where raiders carried away the young and strong under cover of night. A web woven not of silk or rope, but of need, greed, and silent bargains. The ship sails on its dragon prow, turned now toward home. The men aboard speak little, watching the stars, listening to the sigh of the sea beneath the keel. The journey has changed them, as all journeys do, but perhaps they do not yet know how their small part in this silent trade has added one more thread to the great tapestry of power that would one day shape kings and kingdoms, laws and legends. The wind rises gently, the sail fills, and the ship moves forward, as all things must carried by currents, both seen and unseen. Somewhere ahead beyond the horizon await new shores, new markets, and new bargains that will carry this silent commerce into the next age. But for now, only the sea knows the full measure of the trade that has passed across its face. The night deepens, and the ship's sail glows faintly in the silver light of a rising moon. The wind hums low in the rigging, as if remembering the voices of those who once stood upon the deck, guiding the vessel through the darkened waterways of a restless age. The silent trade, the hidden commerce that for centuries nourished the rise of northern kings in southern cities, seems as enduring as the stars that glimmer above. And yet nothing stays unchanged forever. As the ship glides onward, imagine now the shores it once approached with ease, the low beaches, the quiet river mouths, the unguarded settlements drowsing in the early mist. In the first seasons of this silent commerce, there were no watchtowers upon these shores, no signal fires lit upon the hills to warn of sails upon the horizon. The land and its people lay vulnerable to the swift arrivals of ships whose purpose was known only too late. But time, like the sea itself, wears upon all things. Word spread along the coasts tales of ships that came not only with goods for trade, but with chains for captives, of markets where lives were weighed alongside furs and silver. And so slowly, quietly, the edges of the known world began to change. On the Irish coasts, small monasteries that once stood alone amid green fields and stone walls became fortresses in miniature. The monks who once labored over illuminated manuscripts, i.e. took up the building of stronger walls, thicker doors. Villages that once trusted in isolation as their shield now raised wooden palisades, dug moats, trained watchmen to keep vigil through the long hours of night. The very landscape began to harden. Where once had been soft curves of earth and meadow, now rose lines of defense, scars of caution drawn across the land. Along the riverways of the east, the Slavic tribes, the Finnic peoples, the Rus, those who had long been traders or prey, began to fortify their own settlements. Trading posts became walled towns. Merchant paths became guarded routes. The silent markets that once thrived beneath the canopy of ancient trees grew wary. Where once a nod, a glance, a hand raised in agreement was enough to seal a bargain, now came the demand for witnesses, for written marks, for the presence of armed men standing close at hand. The silent trade, once fluid, as the tides now encountered eddies of resistance, places where the flow slowed, where the easy passage of goods and captives alike met with watchfulness. And still the Viking ships came seeking silver, seeking profit, seeking new shores, where defenses might still be thin, where the old ways of silent commerce might yet prevail. But the world was learning, as all worlds do. The wealth that flowed northward, the silver that filled the hoards, had built not only halls and ships, it had built awareness, it had built caution. And in that caution, new shapes began to form upon the map of Europe. The great powers of the south, the Frankish kings, the rising princes of the Rus, the lords of England, and the Gaelic chieftains of Ireland watched the coasts and rivers more closely. They built fleets to match the longships, raised armies, skilled not only for battle on land, but for the defense of the waterways that had once been the hidden roads of commerce and conquest. Even the markets of the distant South, Constantinople's shining harbor through Baghdad's sprawling souks, began to change. The traders of the Islamic world in the Byzantine court grew wary of goods brought by northern hands, suspecting perhaps the hidden cost in blood that stained the silver and furs. The appetite for human cargo did not vanish, but the paths along which that trade had flowed began to dry or to shift into deeper, darker channels where only the most desperate or ruthless would follow. And within the Northlands themselves, change whispered through the forests and fjords. The silver brought home from the east, the wealth drawn from the silent trade had done its work. It had raised petty chieftains to kings, had turned scattered farmsteads into realms. But with kingship came new concerns. No longer could a ruler simply look outward for wealth. Now he must look inward, seeking to bind his people together, to keep peace within his growing domain, to answer the questions of conscience that rose with the spread of a new faith. Christianity's slow, patient arrival in the north brought with it a different measure of wealth, a different understanding of power. The silent trade, with its hidden markets and human cost, sat uneasily beside the teachings of a faith that spoke of mercy, of compassion, of the equal worth of all souls beneath heaven's gaze. And so as Christian crosses rose beside the old sacred groves, as churches replaced the sites where blots and sacrifices had once been held, the silent trade began its slow retreat, not all at once, not everywhere, but step by step as dawn chases night from the land. The longships too changed their course. Where once they slipped into hidden inlets to trade for captives or silver, to now they sailed with bolder purpose, seeking not hidden markets, but open conquest or peaceful trade with distant kings and courts. The silent commerce of the past faded into the mist of memory, replaced by treaties, by embassies, by wars waged not for slaves, but for land, for titles, for faith. And yet, as we drift here in thought, tracing these quiet transformations, we may wonder, did the silent trade truly vanish? Or did it merely change its face as so much does with time? In the hidden corners of Europe, in the forgotten eddies of great rivers, surely the old ways lingered a little longer unseen. Unrecorded but present still in the shadows where history rarely shines its light. The ship glides on now, approaching familiar shores. The forests give way to fields. The river widens into the sea. The wind fills the sail and the longship begins its final journey home, carrying not only the silver and goods of its voyage, but the subtle knowledge that the world through which it sailed is no longer the world it left behind. The moon, high and pale, watches over the water as it has watched over countless such journeys. And as the ship disappears into the soft horizon where sea meets sky, the silent trade too recedes its time, passing like the tide, leaving only faint traces upon the shore of memory. And in that stillness, with only the sound of the waves and the wind, we are left to ponder how much of the world we know was shaped not by battles sung of in song or treaties carved in stone, but by these quiet exchanges, these hidden currents that once flowed silently beneath the surface of history. The sea stretches ahead, vast and quiet beneath the pale light of dawn. The longship, its journey nearly complete, moves gently with the rhythm of the tide, its sails slackening as the wind softens. The coast of home lies somewhere beyond the silver horizon, where low hills rise like the backs of sleeping beasts. The men on board stand silent now, as if aware that this voyage marks not only the return to familiar shores, but the passing of an age. For centuries, these ships and the silent commerce they carried shaped the fate of lands near and far. Yet as we follow the ship's slow return, we might wonder what remains of those hidden trades, those unseen exchanges that once wove their way through forests and along rivers, across seas, and into the hearts of cities. The traces, if we look closely, are still there, faint as footprints in the sand, yet enduring. Consider the hoards of silver buried deep beneath the earth of Scandinavia. Arm rings coins stamped with the marks of distant caliphs and emperors, beads of glass and amber, strung together like frozen drops of sunlight. These treasures, unearthed by the plow or the archaeologist's careful hand, tell of wealth amassed quietly without the grand declarations of kings or the blare of war horns. They speak of a commerce that fed the growth of power not in great battles, but in the steady accumulation of silver, paid for in part with the silent trade of human lives. And there are other signs if one knows where to look. The stones of old fortresses along the coasts of Ireland and England, stones laid hurriedly with hands that worked by torchlight in fear of sails upon the sea. The hidden harbors long abandoned where Viking ships once anchored to conduct their business, far from the eyes of local rulers. The runes carved upon standing stones naming chieftains who grew rich and bold, whose strength came as much from trade as from war. Even the place names scattered across the map of Europe hold echoes of this silent legacy. Names that trace the routes of the traders, the Norsemen's landing places along the rivers of the east, the market towns that once bustled with goods and tongues from every corner of the known world. Each name a faint reminder of the ships that once came with furs, with amber, with captives hidden beneath the deck. And what of the people themselves, those whose lives became entangled in this great web of silent commerce? Their stories were not written in the sagas or the chronicles, but their presence shaped the lands they reached. The servants in the halls of southern kings, the laborers who helped raise the walls of new cities, the craftsmen whose skills enriched their new homes, even as they longed for the ones they had lost. The threads of their lives, though unrecorded, are woven through the fabric of European history. As the longship nears the coast, the men aboard gaze toward the land. Perhaps they see the smoke of hearth fires rising from the longhouses of their home village. Perhaps they see the glint of the sun upon the roof of a hall newly built, with the silver earned on this and other voyages. They say nothing. The sea has taught them silence, as has the trade that brought them here. But the world awaiting them has changed. The wealth that silent trade once brought so easily now demands a higher price. The coasts they once raided or traded along are more heavily guarded. The markets that once welcomed their goods now ask more questions, demand more proof of honest dealing. The old paths are narrowing, the tides of fortune's turning. And yet the ship lands as it always has, its keel sliding onto the shingle, its sail lowered with practiced care. The crew steps ashore, weary but watchful, carrying their silver, their goods, and the unspoken weight of what they have seen and done. Behind them, the sea erases their wake, as it has for countless ships before. The legacy of the silent trade is not one of monuments or great works recorded in stone. It is quieter, more subtle. It lives in the wealth that built early kingdoms, in the changes to law and custom that came as rulers sought to control or end the trade, in the mingling of peoples and cultures that followed the paths first traced by these ships. It lives too in the questions it leaves behind, questions that drift upon the air like the mist rising from the sea. How many lives were shaped or ended by these hidden transactions? How many destinies were altered by the silver that changed hands in secret? How different might the map of Europe look had the silent trade never existed? The ship is drawn up onto the beach, its hull resting now upon the sand like a creature returned to shore after a long swim. The men unload their goods, moving with the quiet efficiency of those who have done this many times before. No songs are sung, no banners are raised. The wealth they bring home will speak for itself in the feast laid upon the table and the gifts given to secure alliances in the walls built higher to guard against future need. And still the sea whispers. The tide comes in, erasing the marks of keel and boot from the shore. The wind carries away the last trace of voices and movement. What remains is only the memory of ships upon the water of trades, struck in silence of lives that crossed unseen through the currents of history. The silent trade did not vanish all at once. Like the slow retreat of the tide, it ebbed away over generations, leaving behind only scattered traces. Laws were written to forbid the taking of men and women by force. The rise of Christian kings in the north brought new codes of conduct, new teachings that condemned the trade in human lives. The markets of the south turned their gaze to other goods, other needs. And the ships that once carried captives now bore envoys, pilgrims, merchants with open ledgers rather than hidden chains. Yet in quiet corners, the old ways lingered as they often do. A bargain struck in secret, a ship's cargo hidden beneath tarps and timber, a path taken at night far from prying eyes. For wherever there is profit, there will be those who seek it even in shadows. The sea, eternal and indifferent, remembers all. The ships that came and went, the markets that thrived and faded, the voices of those who bargained, those who were bought, those who sailed the hidden routes of commerce that shaped the world. The sea holds their memory as it holds the bones of ships long sunken, the silver lost in storms, the echoes of oars that once stirred its surface. And so as we watch the last of the longship's crew vanish into the gathering dusk, we are left with a quiet understanding. The silent trade, the hidden commerce of 1,000 tides, shaped more than the wealth of men. It shaped the course of nations, the rise of kings, the laws we inherited, the world we see around us. And like the sea itself, its legacy is deep, complex, and sometimes difficult to see. But it is there beneath the surface, waiting for those who care to look and to listen. The long ship lies at rest, now pulled high upon the shingle, its hull drying in the salt wind. The men have gone ashore, their burdens of silver and goods carried up the narrow path toward the hall that waits beyond the dunes. The tide, ever faithful, moves in and out, smoothing the tracks left behind. Before long, the beach will look untouched, as though no ship had landed there, no trade had been made, no silent cargo had been carried across the sea. And so too did the memory of the silent trade begin to fade. Not in an instant, not with some great decree or final voyage, but slowly as a mist draws over the water, softening the edges of all that was once clear. Imagine now the generations that came after. The sons and daughters of those who sailed the long ships, who watched their fathers return with silver, and stories grew to see a different world. A world where kings raised stone churches upon the sites of the old sacred groves, where the cross rose above the doorways where once only runes had been carved. A world where laws written now upon vellum and sealed with wax forbade what had once been done without question, the taking of men and women to sell at hidden markets, the exchange of human lives for silver or goods. And yet, even as the trade itself waned, its traces remained woven into the stories told on winter nights. whispered beside hearth fires as the wind howled beyond the thick doors of timber halls. Picture a child wrapped in furs lying upon the raised sleeping platform at the back of a longhouse. The fire burns low, casting soft flickers upon the beams. An elder speaks, his voice slow and measured, telling of the days when the ships came and went, like seabirds upon the tide, bringing wealth and danger in equal measure. The child listens wide-eyed to tales of far-off markets, where silver shone like the moon upon water, where strange tongues mingled in the air, where goods and lives alike changed hands in the hush of the forest's edge. These stories, carried from mouth to ear, from hearth to hall, became part of the great fabric of memory that holds a people together. And with each telling, the silent trade slipped further from harsh reality into the realm of legend. Its sharp edges softened, its shadows deepened. But memory is a strange sea, as deep and shifting as the ocean itself. Some things are forgotten entirely. Others sink beneath the surface, only to rise again when the tides of time bring them to light. And so it was with the silent trade. In some places, the echoes lingered in law. The codes of kings and councils spoke of rights and freedoms, of the worth of men and women, of penalties for those who would take what was not theirs. These laws, written in ink upon parchment, bore within them the memory of a time when such protections had not existed, when the taking of a person for profit had been part of the quiet commerce of the world. In other places, the memory survived in custom. The watch kept upon the coast, the lighting of signal fires at the sight of sails, the building of strong doors and stout walls. All these practices, though now aimed at different dangers, had their roots in the days when the longships came silently upon the shore, bringing traders who might offer goods or take captives. And in still other places, the memory lay hidden in the very bones of the land. The stones of ruined watchtowers overgrown with moss and ivy. The worn tracks that led from secret harbors to old market sites, now nothing more than a faint line through the grass. The names upon the map that spoke of landings, of markets, of crossings long forgotten. Consider the river that once bore the silent ships deep into the continent's heart. Their waters still run, their banks still bear the marks of ancient paths. The traders are gone, their ships replaced by new vessels, their bargains replaced by new commerce. But the rivers remember. They remember the splash of oars, the soft creak of timber, the hush of men who spoke in low voices as they weighed silver in the palm or bound the wrists of the unwilling. And the sea remembers too. The sea, that great keeper of secrets, holds in its depths the bones of ships lost in storm or battle. The scattered coins of hordes never claimed the fragments of cargo meant for markets that no longer exist. It remembers the cries of captives, the shouts of sailors, the sigh of sails filled with wind that carried both hope and sorrow across the waves. As the years passed, as the trade faded and the world changed, the memory of these things became like the sound of the tide itself, always present, but so familiar that it was no longer heard. The people of the North turned their faces to new concerns, to faith, to farming, to the building of towns and cities, to the forging of new ties with distant lands, through embassies and treaties rather than through silent commerce. But beneath it all, like the bedrock beneath the soil, the legacy of the silent trade remained. It shaped the wealth upon which early kingdoms were built. It influenced the laws that came to guard against its return. It marked the boundaries of lands and the courses of rivers, the placement of towns and the paths of trade that would endure long after the longships were no more than stories. And so as the ship lies still upon the shore, as the last of its cargo is carried inland, as the tide rises to wash away the prints of bare feet and booted tread, alike we are left to wonder how many of the truths of history lie beneath such fading echoes. How much of what we know or think we know is built upon the silent commerce of forgotten days. The sea answers only with its endless rhythm. The wind with its soft swaying through grass and over stone. The night with its long hush in which all stories and time come to rest. In the end, perhaps it is fitting that the memory of the silent trade remains so quiet. For it was a commerce born in silence, carried out beneath the gaze of stars and in the shadow of trees, leaving few marks upon the world, save those that time itself could not erase. And now, as the first light of morning brushes the sea with silver, as the longship rests empty upon the shore, we too can rest, knowing that the tale of the silent trade is not forgotten, only waiting like the tide to be seen again by those who listen closely and look beyond the surface. The light of dawn grows stronger, now spreading across the sea like a veil of pale gold. The waves, so dark and secret in the night, glimmer softly as they rise and fall in endless procession. The longship rests where it was drawn ashore, its hull weathered by salt, and time its dragon prow turned inland as if watching over the land that shaped it and the people who built it. The men have gone. The cargo has stored the silver, hidden the goods divided according to promise and rank. The beach is quiet again, save for the murmur of the tide and the cry of distant gulls. And the ship, once a vessel of silent trade, lies empty, its journey's done for now. And so too does the story of the Viking slave ships and their hidden commerce draw to a close. But like the sea that touches every shore, its legacy remains flowing beneath the surface of what we know, shaping the world in ways too subtle to mark. Consider the wealth that these silent trades once brought. Silver coins buried deep beneath longhouses in hoards, secreted away beneath ancient trees, beneath stones that bore no name. Silver that paid for the building of ships, the forging of blades, the raising of halls, and the feeding of warriors. This wealth drawn from the quiet commerce of furs and amber, of honey and wax, but also of lives bought and sold in the hush of forest clearings and hidden river markets, built the foundations of kingdoms that endure in memory. And with wealth came power. Chieftains, who once ruled a single fjord, came to command whole regions. Petty kings became lords of many villages, many ships. Fortresses rose where once had been only earth and wood. The silent trade had done its work, shaping not only fortunes, but the very idea of rulership, of the right to rule, of the means by which power is claimed and held. But power built upon such foundations carries with it the weight of memory. The kings who came after the rulers, who wore crosses upon their tunics, who spoke of laws written by divine hand, who sent priests and monks to bring faith to the furthest corners of their realms, carried in their veins the silver of the silent trade, whether they acknowledged it or not. Their thrones rested upon wealth drawn from many sources. Some praised, some hidden, some best left unspoken as the world changed around them. And the world did change. Slowly at first, like the turning of the tide. The silent markets grew quieter. The laws grew stronger. The faith that spread across the north brought new teachings, new codes. The taking of men and women to sell in hidden markets became not only a danger to the taker, but a sin upon the soul. The longships that once carried captives now carried pilgrims, merchants, envoys, bearing gifts and letters sealed with wax and marked with the symbols of kings. But memory lingers like the salt in the wood of an old ship, like the grain of the sand upon the beach where the keel once rested. The traces of that commerce are still with us if we care to look. In the hoards that lie beneath the soil in the place, names that mark where ships once landed, in the stones of the old watchtowers that crumble now beneath ivy and moss, and in the stories. Always the stories. Stories told at the edge of firelight as the wind rattles the shutters of an ancient hall. Stories whispered by old men who remember what their fathers' fathers once said. Stories that slip between fact and legend, between history and dream. Stories of ships that came in the night, of traders who spoke in many tongues of silver, that gleamed in the moonlight, of lives that vanished down the river never to return. The beach where the ship rests will soon be empty. The tide will rise again, washing away the footprints, softening the marks where the keel pressed into the sand. The ship will be repaired, or it will decay, or it will be burned upon a funeral pyre, when at last it has served its purpose, and time will carry the memory of its voyages further and further into the mist. But we, for a little while, have followed its course. We have traced the hidden paths it sailed, the rivers and inlets, the silent markets, the shifting tides of trade and power that shape the world we know. We have heard in the hush of imagined oars and the sigh of the sea, the echoes of a commerce long past but not forgotten. And as the sun rises higher, and the sea turns from silver to blue beneath its gaze, we can let the story rest. Like the ship upon the beach, like the silver buried in the earth, like the bones of those who sailed and traded and were traded. Resting, waiting, part of the great ocean of memory that holds all that was. For the silent trade was not only a tale of ships and markets of silver and slaves. It was in its way a mirror showing us the tides that carry all human endeavor. The desire for wealth, the reach for power, the price paid often unseen by those caught in the currents of history. And like all such tides, it has ebbed, leaving behind faint lines upon the shore. Lines that fade with each passing wave, yet never truly vanish. So now, as the last of the ship's shadow disappears from the sand, As the waves smooth the beach, as the breeze carries the scent of salt in Pine Inland, we can let the journey end. The story has been told, the echoes have been heard, the tide has come and gone. And all that remains is the sea's quiet song and the soft knowledge that beneath the calm surface, the deep currents of history continue to flow unseen but always present. Let the wind blow gently, let the sea rest. Let the memory of the silent trade drift with the tide as we too drift towards sleep, carried by the same rhythms that have guided ships and stories since the world was young.